Olá, estamos no ar com um novo episódio do Núclea Talks. O Núclea Talks é o podcast aqui da Núclea, onde a gente traz para vocês assuntos de tecnologia, financeiro e outros mercados. Eu sou o Raphael Mielle, sou superintendente da área de antifraude e IA aqui na Núclea, e hoje nós temos aqui convidados internacionais com a gente. A gente vai fazer esse podcast em inglês, mas vai ter a tradução para vocês aí nas legendas. Acompanhe com a gente. Welcome to Núclea, Paolo Sironi, Global Research Leader of IBM for Banking. It's nice to welcome here in our studio in São Paulo. Can you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, buongiorno a tutti. Paolo Sironi, as you said. My role in IBM is to lead the banking and financial market research globally in what we call the IBM Institute for Business Value. Essentially, the Institute for Business Value is where we try to connect the dots between business and technology. We know that technology sometimes inspires a business transformation, but more and more so is the precondition to allow business to be transformed. And the challenges that the financial services industry faces are pretty daunting. There are amazing technologies out there, but making sure that you can deploy them in that speed in generative value is not immediately consequential. So our role is to help decision makers to make the best informed business decisions with technology.
Amazing. Also joining us today is Lucas Sancassani, Head of Credit Cards at Núclea. Thank you for being here, Lucas.
Thank you so much. I'm not as important as Paulo, but I'm the head of credit cards here in Brazil at Núclea. We manage something like 4 trillion Brazilian reais in credit cards volume in a yearly basis. I also have 20 years of market experience in banking and finance. I'm very, very happy and honored to be here with you guys.
Oh, thank you, Lucas. Paulo, let's start with the big picture. One of the recent reports of IBM Institute for Business Value highlights a growing divide in global banking performance. In your view, what are the key forces driving this gap between industry leaders and the laggards?
Okay, that's a very good question. And first of all, when I do research for the IBV, I look at the opinions of the clients, so the executives working in banking and fintech institutions. I filter those through our deeper perspective and surveys that are also engaging the clients of those institutions, being small, medium entrepreneurs, for example, or retail clients. But I always start from the understanding of the financial performance, because in the very end, what every CEO needs to do is to make sure that design the business with technology in a way that the financial performance is healthy, sustained, right, and under control. And what we've seen in the last 15 years, starting from 2008, when Lehman Brothers defaulted, is that worldwide, the financial performance of financial institutions were constrained into a certain funnel that was tighter in some markets and steeper to a lower level in some compared to others, which primarily is a condition dictated by the level of the interest rates.
Yeah.
So they went down more or less everywhere in the world, clearly less in Brazil compared to Europe or Japan. And the regulation that basically tried to save the system, increasing the cost of capital. And on top of this, there could be other conditions around banking that relate to policymaking or the economy in that jurisdiction. What that reveals is that most of the capability of CEOs to drive financial performance is depleted or very constrained. So for banks, differentiating the one from the others became very, very complex. So all were going basically down to a lower level. Now, since most of the profitability is still constrained or linked to the level of interest rates and macroeconomic conditions, when the pandemic started and then ended, things opened up because macroeconomic conditions started changing very fast. Like Europe went from negative to 5% interest rates, which definitely gave a boost to the profitability of banks. And that happened also in the US, but with a different, if you like, intensity. Because in the US, you see that some of the largest banks, federal banks, got more traction in terms of financial performance compared to the national banks, which was also due to technology, because clients were moving their money from local banks after the default of Silicon Valley Bank, looking for a safer haven with a bigger bank at the time where banks could price on their clients higher interest rates, and so on and so forth. So what we see basically is that for the last 2 years, given the fact that these levels changed in a differentiated way, financial performance started differentiating on the world stage across jurisdictions and inside jurisdictions. And in some cases, technology was there to help banks accelerate. 2 key examples, if you like, of this. Starling Bank in the UK and the Nubank in Brazil. When the pandemic started and the digital adaptation of society accelerated, they were more capable of grabbing that trend. Nubank expanding their client base on the retail market, and Starling Bank in the UK, that primarily served small and medium enterprises, was capable of providing support to these entrepreneurs with the government guarantees. So they were much faster than the other banks to have the solution available on their website to capture more business. So they started becoming profitable for the first time in a moment of difficulty for everybody. So this is a clear indication that technology can help banks differentiate financial performance, and you see clearly when things shift, so some have an advantage they can play, right, and the others start becoming a bit more laggards. However, there's something that I believe we need to clearly state here. The real issue of a CEO, if I were a banking CEO, would be to insulate my financial performance from the external factors, because interest rates went up in most parts of the world, but they may not stay there. We already know that there are tensions and issues in the economic cycle, so they may go down again. And so what the CEO needs to do is to be capable of driving effectively the performance in a way that in good times and in bad times, right, they have a capability of steering it to be sustained performance, okay? So through the cycle. And where is the secret sauce to do that? I would blame a central banker for that, because it's good to blame central bankers, they have big shoulders. Yeah. But and that also corresponds to the content of my literature. We have here my 5th bestseller, Banks and Fintech of Platinum Economies, that reports on this one. When Mario Draghi, the former chairman of the European Central Bank, left office in 2019, and Ms. Lagarde came to Frankfurt, he was talking to the journalist in the press room of the ECB. And one journalist asked him whether the negative interest rates, say complex macroeconomic conditions like those today, would generate the next collapse of the financial system. And Mario Draghi explained that, of course, banks love positive interest rates, right? But he pointed to the fact that, particularly looking at Europe, which has been a weak banking system for a long time, the cost-income ratio in many banks is way off the average indicators, he said. So his point was we should not be concerned about the level of interest rates. We should not understand that. We should instead understand how to adjust the business model to get the benefit of the digitalization of financial services. Now, when central bankers talk, every word matters like a stone. Yeah. So it didn't say banks have to lift and shift their business model on cloud or hybrid cloud, right, and plug in some AI, make it happen. He said they have to adjust the business model to get the benefit of the digitalization of technology and financial services. And most of my work in literature in the ABV is try to explain with a big picture and details what that business model transformation should look like.
Oh, perfect. And Lucas, here in Brazil, we see a lot of payment institutions pushing this transformation. Do you think it's the same behavior here?
The same
behavior, the same.
So I would just add to what Paolo said that I think, well, what he mentioned is that, you can separate like performing banks from non-performing banks. And he basically made a case of technology, which I think is it actually can has like an important role of like dividing who is doing well from who is not performing well. I would add also like cost control, which is something very important. In the bottom line, if in the one hand you cannot forecast with a lot of accuracy like how much is going to be your revenues like in 3, 5, 10 years from now, you can definitely control your costs.
Yeah.
I think that's something absolutely important. And I would also bring it to the table that not only looking to your P&L, but also being able to position yourself like in a certain niches that are very profitable, and to be ready to capture value when those niches are peaking. That's absolutely important. You just making the case of payments in Brazil, we see that the payments itself, like you don't get a lot of revenues from payments, but you do get a lot of revenues from businesses that are around it.
Yeah.
For instance, credit, insurance, or whatever, like other like services that are complementary to the main offer of payments. And if you're able to shift that mindset, of your financial institution to capture value from those movements, then you would perform well, as Paolo was saying. So I would just add like those two things. I think payments firm, as to your question, payments firm in Brazil, you have like some very fast transformations in the industry. So you have like instant payments like Pix. You have like a revolution in credit cards. Credit cards, they still grow a lot in Brazil, like 10%. CAGR in a yearly basis, like 10% of growth. Also, bank slips. We see here in Núclea, like they're still like growing. So it's still like a not clear arena, but I think the firms, they have to adapt, very fast and constantly to be able to be profitable. So as to your question.
But in the same line, do you believe banks with strong tech foundations are setting the pace? And what specifically defines a strong tech foundation now in 2025?
That's a good question, even though technology by itself is not enough if you don't have a clear business perspective. And the reason is because one thing that kept the banks behind from their competitors is not just the fact that their technology was not keeping up with the new standards, is the fact that they lost a bit of causality in the way they've been building technology in the past, as there was not a clear and conscious connection between business requirements and technology transformation.
Yeah.
So things happened in waves as it was needed. So for banks to shift from the current status, the legacy thinking, not just legacy architecture, to the new world became extremely complicated. So not all the startups were good at building data foundation, but some effectively were pretty efficient. And what happens is that they could build like a greenfield without having that legacy. So I do believe that if all understand the principles, in the medium term, there will be a realignment of that because banks are making a sincere effort to transform this way. And they're recognizing that not always the ideas they had in the past in terms of generative value with technology was correct. You mentioned before, Lucas, about the cost-income ratio of banks. Effectively, if you look at the statistics, in the last 15 years, the cost-income ratio globally, as an average, remained pretty sticky, like that in the major advanced economies in the American definition, let's say the G7 plus, trailed around 50 to 60%. In Latin America, that is lower, trending around 30 to 40%. You have some new players, a new bank, which is at the 30%, so at the most efficient level. In Europe, there will be the Nordic banks, which are around 40%. The German banks is sometimes 70, 80, 90%, so this kind of dispersion. But the point is that not always banks thought that just transforming with a cloud perspective the benefit could be realized, or they thought I do cloud and I get a reduction, and that didn't happen. So what I'm actually researching now is exactly this. So what went wrong in the way banks thought of applying the new technology that did not unlock the benefits they were thinking of. And I think while talking to so many CIOs, we are at an inflection point where they are recognizing that not always their perspective was correct. Like, we're moving from technologies which are more, if you like, stable to framework which are more unstable, and we use stable and unstable in a very respectful way, right? But is it the fact that the moment you operate on cloud, you have a higher space for vulnerabilities. You have to work differently. So cloud is not just a collection of computing capabilities, access somewhere else. Is a way of working around those capabilities. And many banks realize that they don't have all the competencies. They didn't think about the compliance that was needed since the very beginning to move there. Also because maybe the sort of lift and shifting without having a business discussion that would have facilitated a simplification of the framework before they were facing the problem of transformation on cloud. But if I can spell a positive note for the bankers, this is not just for the bankers. Without quoting, but I was also talking to the head of financial services of one of the largest technology companies in the world, in the new world, that deals with drivers and also financial services. I just want to quote, but you figure out. And in this conversation was geared around embedded finance. These guys, which are very successful and very well recognized in the world, were telling me that they wanted to learn more about banks and cloud. And when I asked them why, they said, when the pandemic started, we saw the volume soaring on our platform for people doing the thing, like booking the travel or looking for food. But not necessarily that the growth corresponded to a same increase of the revenues. So all of a sudden, the cloud cost skyrocketed. So many misunderstood the economic model around the technology. Every time you go on your phone, by clicking on it, you're consuming a technical resource. It's somewhere that is a cost that needs to be covered. And there are techniques to make sure that that doesn't go off trail, but I think that many did not think about that. So as they were successful in the digital transformation and more the engagement happened on cloud, the model they set for cloud was not fit for a different speed in between the increase of cost and the increase of revenues. And so this is, I guess, what we sensed in the last 2 years in many conversations with the CEOs of banks worldwide. There's a moment of reflection and appraisal of, the perspective was not fully grounded. And so I do believe that now these lessons learned will enable the financial institutions to move a bit faster and better compared to what it did in the previous 10 years, maybe closing the gap between the old legacy institutions with the new players, that some of them proved effectively that they could play with technology in a linear way and more successful with a more successful approach.
No, perfect. Lucas, you have a huge experience here in Brazil in big banks. How was for the big banks here in Brazil changing this the technology, going for data center to cloud? It was too hard for them.
Right. I think that it was pretty clear to major financial institutions here in Brazil that investing in technology is something crucial for their bottom line in the end. So as you probably saw, Brazil is like one of the most developed countries in terms of financial systems. We have wire transfer like since like the 80s, 90s. We have very effective instant payment systems. We have fraud prevention systems that are top notch.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So we did or since a long time ago, we have been investing in technology, and we understand that this is something that has a real impact on business and profitability of the banks. And by the way, banks in Brazil, they're pretty profitable. We operate in ROEs of 20s, double digits here. So it's as you probably know better than myself, Paolo, we do have a lot of pretty profitable banks here. And despite of always investing, I would say from 2010 onwards, the transformation of the finance industry has been accelerating because of very impactful technology that have been showing up in the market, like cloud, as you said. We talked about instant payments. We're talking now about AI, and a lot of like very important technologies and very disruptive technologies or they have been in a market of like from 2010 onwards, and that is, I think there's some banks that are successful in implementing those technologies, and by the way, those are like more profitable right now. They have like big stakes in the market, like larger market shares, and you see some players that are still like struggling with that. So I don't think it's as to your question, I don't think it's pretty straightforward to banks, and the ones that did, they are enjoying market leadership and high profitability. We see in every quarter the reports and the quarterly results of the major banks, and you clearly see the ones that invested in those like new technologies, they were able to implement them.
Yeah,
they're having better results. So that doesn't refers only to major banks, but also to fintechs. You see like fintechs or big tech companies like Nubank, as to example that Paolo mentioned, that are very, very competent in implementing technology and using that to generate more business. They have been very successful, as to the ones that were not quite successful and that they're basically disappearing or having to switch their model, pivoting everything, like redoing everything. So that's it. That's my opinion.
No, perfect. And just talking a little more about the creation of the fintechs and how they change the market here in Brazil. Do you think they accelerate for the banks this transformation? They started to invest more in technology after the beginning of the fintechs here in Brazil?
So I would also like to hear Paulo's opinion on that, but they certainly provide a more competitive landscape, which demands the incumbents to invest in technology, provide better services, decrease their costs. So I think they kind of it's mandatory for banks to invest to keep up with fintechs, and we also have an ecosystem here in Brazil that is very that favors fintechs. The regulator, does a lot of encouragement to new technologies, to new players, to increase the competition in the market. So it's mandatory for banks to invest in technology to keep up with those new players. Otherwise, and we saw like in Brazil, like some of them, they grew so fast. We see like companies that started really small and now like they're listed in Nasdaq, like Stone, XP, Nubank, Inter. They're like banks that in the past they started like really small, really robust tech platforms, and they grew up and they're like kind of competing with the major banks.
Well, without being disrespectful, but we can also say that for the last 10 years of, let's say, fintech innovation, quite a number of banks have been playing innovation more like an innovation theater. So we need to talk about that. We need to try that, but don't necessarily do that. And some of the bankers were like, well, in the end, fintech will not eat our lunch, right? It's some sort of like something happening in the fringes. But what happened in the last 2-3 years after the pandemic, which is answer to this discussion we had before about the divergent financial performance, is that some of these new banks went profitable. So started with Starling Bank, Nubank, and Revolut. Now, being profitable doesn't mean that it will always be profitable. Okay, so they're exposed to business risk as much as the others. But you saw the way the bankers changed the perspective, where they thought, where effectively, okay, there is a real space to generate that profitability while being leaner, right, and closer to the customer compared to what we've been trying to do, which gave a further push to their, if you like, conceptualization on how they effectively need to be serious in investment technology. And this is important because what we are also seeing now is the advent of AI. And AI is not a bottom-up innovation. AI is a top-down strategy. And, if the innovation theater is a bottom-up, something happens here and there is a good story, but doesn't change, move the needle. And I feel that the bankers started, not all of them, but quite a number, facing the AI journey the same way. And now we have clear indication why the others that were more, I feel like, strategic, are setting the pace right. And will be able to move forward consistently. In 2024, beginning of last year, we researched on 600 institutions with more than 10 billion total assets, serving their people with responsibilities in data and AI. And we asked if they intend or not to use generative AI to transform the way the institution work. And you know how many said they don't intend to use generative AI at all? Worldwide, the number was 14%. Interesting. But 8% instead demonstrated a strategic approach. That means when we looked at what they were doing, they were working on thinking about AI and technology across all of the spectrum of their business domains at the same time. Well, 70% were using generative AI to test it or to go live, but in a very tactical approach, like starting here and there, just to say, someone in retail banking has money, I start there. Someone in corporate banking has an ambition, I start there. But there is a problem. It doesn't scale. Because it didn't set the right technology foundations to allow AI to scale enterprise-wide. And we've been very diligent in talking to a lot of institutions and researching about that to explain the preconditions, and I hope, actually believe it, because I see it, that this is helping bankers now that they realize that the fintech innovation can generate sustained revenues and profitability at lower cost-income ratios. They have to reconsider the way they do with AI differently from what they started, facing and implementing fintech innovation in the past. So those that didn't understand these points will be able to accelerate faster.
Oh, perfect. Let's keep in AI. AI is the new buzzword. Everyone is talking about AI. And
you heard a lot in the Febraban Tech.
Yes, I heard a lot about AI, and especially about agentic AI. Agentic AI is described as the next frontier. How do you make the difference between traditional AI, generative AI, and agentic AI? And what's the impact of could agentic AI have on banking workflows?
It's a good question, and actually it covers a very large spectrum, and sometimes the definitions are ambiguous. But let's start from the underneath, what's underneath the surface. Before I said that, banks started moving 10 years ago from a more stable technology on-prem to more unstable technology on cloud. And the same shift happens in the analytics, because analytics used to be like very deterministic. Machine learning already adds some element of probabilistic behavior, but more under control, though there you already had issues in terms of governing the transparency, the robustness of the model, right, the explicability. And then generative AI shifts very fast that framework into something that is effectively way more complex, to be managed, especially because when machine learning in many cases was developed internally, generative AI starts requiring banks to consume those capabilities from third parties. So you need to basically be capable of going down the road to understand what happens there. And that's not enough, because now agentic AI is coming to the fore, which means you may have a set of technology elements that are defined agents with intentionality. So the difference between a pure agent and agentic AI is that the decision-making process that entity can do can go end-to-end. And can start interacting and collaborating with other agents in ways that are not set in stone in a set of what-if rules, but they correspond to a definition of goals, definition of risk profiles and perspectives and behaviors that they are tasked to do, and they can basically go and do it. So that increases the instability of the system, at the same time also the complexity of the system. Okay, so when you look at this, you understand, why risk management is the turnkey that enables you to understand how to develop, test, and deploy these technologies in a way that you control the probabilistic frameworks around that. It also happens that for the first time, it's the IT department that deals with analytics, which are highly probabilistic. In the past, that happened in the ivory towers of trading floors and the risk management, where they set all the principles. There were multiple layers of regulation trying to bring it all around in the same table, the same way, in the good way. Regulation was not perfect, bankers were not perfect. And now this explodes on the technology side. So what we're seeing is that knowing that you're increasing complexity and the autonomy, the intentionality of the technology pieces in order to interact in a business framework, it is that risk management perspective that will dictate what bankers will be comfortable in doing or will not be comfortable in doing. We researched last year on 3,000 CEOs worldwide, of which 300 from financial institutions, about this perspective. So you're now getting into more and more, let's say, open or stable technology. So are you ready for that? And for the first time, 66% of CEOs have said that they must take more risks to get the benefit of AI for automation or a competitive differentiation. Now, bankers are, by definition, prudent, or they should be prudent managers. So they really sense that now they need to make the shift. And that's why only those banks which have a clear perspective of how to risk manage technology will be capable of deploying technology to respond to the CEO request. How much risk can we bear, right? And how can we mitigate the risk that we don't want to take while implementing technology?
No, perfect. And we know data is the fuel for AI, and data governance is becoming more critical than ever, particularly with the AI. What are the most overlooked aspects of managing data accuracy, privacy, cybersecurity, and accessibility at scale?
Yes, that's a complex question because data is a difficult animal.
Yeah.
Because data is everywhere, right? And needs to be everywhere, but at the same time, I need to be capable of accessing it in one snapshot. And when we discuss with the clients about the use cases of AI, we effectively have a trilemma that tries to detect what is the potential value that they see in deploying that AI solution, which are the risks that are involved, but also what is the complexity of doing it. And complexity is not an abstract in the sense that a use case in bank A would be maybe highly complex. A use case in bank B will be less complex. What is the difference? The capability of these banks to access data. So those banks that built a better approach in the past that already invested in being capable of connecting to the data and understanding the variability of data will find it easier to deploy AI, right, to create a new solution. Those banks that were not diligent in defining their data layers and structures will not be capable of advancing with AI because basically they didn't do their diligent work in the past. But there's something that also is very important for us to discuss is that the CDOs, the Chief Data Officers, have a very hard job. And we had the research on the Chief Data Officers 2 years ago that revealed that they are one of those titles in the institutions with the highest turnover. So CDOs get in and get out of that role very fast. And the reason is because sometimes they are tasked with too much expectation that they cannot fulfill for two reasons. A, because they don't own the business activity. Right? So for them, to use the data to deploy for value is not that straightforward. But also because there may be a misconception about how to generate value out of data. And if you allow me, I'm happy to give you a story about this. Okay, so,
I would love to, please.
Which is actually the core of my bank's fintech on platform economies. In the 1990s, I was helping my brother to build a startup in Italy that was the Amazon of Italy. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but we really did that, or actually I was helping him to do that. And we thought that we would have made it up. Now, you guys are very young. I'm kind of older. And I remember that in the 1990s, Amazon was only selling books, right?
Only books.
So we saw that. And we built a website. We wanted to sell the best products in the world because we had Italian furniture to sell, right? And you see a lot of Italian furniture and style in Brazil, actually. We had Italian food. The feijoada is amazing, but sorry, in Italy, you can get a lot. We had Italian fashion. Let's see if I'm recorded.
You see also some Italian passports over there?
Italian passport, so Italian travel, okay?
Yeah.
The only thing that we didn't think of selling was Italian soccer because we knew they weren't always up to the task.
Well,
we were patient about the future at the time. But we didn't sell anything. Of course, he didn't hear about it because it didn't work. And we didn't know why. I made many mistakes, but it was a good experience. But then I listened to an interview of Jeff Bezos many years after that was made in the 90s on 60 Minutes, where the journalist asked Bezos, what's Amazon? And Bezos said, Amazon is not a distribution channel of books on the internet. And I was like flabbergasted. It's not a distribution channel of books. Now, why does this matter? Every banker must ask themselves, is a neobank a distribution channel of financial products on mobile? It's the same question. So Amazon explained that, the publishers are sending me letters complaining that I don't understand marketing, and I would never call him stupid, because I allow the users on the platform to post positive and negative reviews. Open and close brackets. I know they can be also abused, so we have a regulatory perspective to make sure that doesn't happen. But then he said, they tell me only post the positive reviews. So you make a momentum, it's like a fear of missing out, and we can sell more. But he goes, no, I don't do this because they are not my client.
Yeah.
He goes, my role is not to be a distributor of their books on the internet. My role is to advise the client on which is the best book to buy.
Right.
And so he picked up one of the books and says, I cannot turn the cover when I'm on Amazon. I cannot smell the glue, which I always do. So the experience is very different. So I may have users on the platform, think users on a digital bank, but they're not motivated to act, in a way that support my business. So positive and negative reviews create a transparency that builds trust for them to act. And then he said, only after I use data and analytics, today we will say AI, generative AI, to enrich the experience of the client and propose something more, okay? Because before I always tell bankers, you think about the data-driven banking, you need to reflect on how you data-enable clients to autonomously act on the digital platform when they think of consuming financial services. And that is often overlooked. So a lot of bankers thought that they would use a chief data officer's capability to scout the data, turbocharge a marketing bazooka that tries to sell to clients. And in some cases, some of the fintech also did that with the fear of missing out. I would not suggest because it's short-lived and is unethical. But instead, they had to think more deeply about how can we use the data to allow the clients to be capable and comfortable about operating on the platform, not just for the basics, but also for something more. And I think that those, and I see some of my relationships starting to do that, understand how they can crack this code. They will basically be capable of leveraging their data in better terms because they flip the concept. It's not the data for our marketing function, it's the data for our client to be capable of deciding by themselves what is worth in their financial services journey.
No, perfect. And you said before the CEOs are more open to risks. Do you think they are ready to allow the AIs to take the decision about risks and credit?
No, they should not.
No?
Not. So that's another key point. So AI can do many things, okay? Yeah. But it can do things that can be done given the structure of financial markets in reality, which is fundamental uncertainty. Now, I said use words that are a bit elevated, but they're fundamental. Why they're fundamental? Because the shift that the financial services industry is tasked to make is like changing the way you produce electricity from a carbon plant to a nuclear plant. wouldn't you change the theory of physics
Yeah.
to do that? Otherwise, you're in trouble. So many pretend to use digital and apply it to the previous theory that has some flaws in the model, right, and the definitions, and then pretend it goes with virality, because digital gives you virality. That only creates problems. So we need to go back to this foundation, which is part of my research and literature, to redefine in positive theory. That means that goes into business model generation. What are the real foundations of financial markets that AI cannot change? AI needs to deal with that. So essentially, without being disrespectful, but this is an industry where a few people pretend to know too much about the future. Nobody knows about the future. You can predict it. And the majority of people fear that they don't know about the future, but they should know enough to be cautious right now. The asymmetry of information that is grounding economic theory since the early 1900s is misconceived, because it's more of a big belief, right? So in the every tower of risk management and trading floors, you can have people with more information than others state that. But we look at the old system level, everything is really uncertain, okay, on the future, because it cannot be predicted. So the realization of that, okay, is what allows you to make financial decisions in the way you consume credit, in the way you invest, in the way you insure yourself, that becomes anti-fragile, that makes sure that is substantiated and is valuable. And AI will not be able to replace that element with automation, full automation of the process, because it's subject to the same fundamental uncertainty that we have. So when you start from this, you realize that the role of AI is not to replace the decisions in a very automated way, but is to augment your capability to make the decisions, making it faster and cheaper, basically, to be realized. Now, if you look at trading floor, of course, they can use AI to power up a high-frequency trading, but there is a very different game. It's a game where, on the same fundamental uncertainty, the speed of making the decision is what push you in front or at the back, being a winner or the laggard. But in the end, it's not that a high-frequency trading algorithm will always be right. So they can also lose big money, right? So now, but that is handled in a framework where you have investment managers, you have regulation around that. And now think about to apply that at the macro level of the individuals. They will not be ready to that because they will not understand the fact that the algorithm can also be wrong, facing fundamental uncertainty. So the real role instead is to identify how you can build that advisory platform that allows to convey the real definition of value that propels inside the economy at the whole level, where it will be less intense for the retail, but definitely deployed to them because they also need it, more intense for the affluent or people with more money that they can basically put on the table of the financial services risk, the casino. But that changes completely the perspective on how you use AI and how you basically intersect the need of making more informed financial decisions, right? So it's a redefinition of the deployment of AI inside that framework, which is the recognition, which is the risk manager recognition that fundamental uncertainty is the structure of the market. That's it.
Oh, perfect. And Lucas, what are seeing here in Brazil? How they are using AI to take these decisions. How it's working here in our market.
So first of all, I like to very much your answer to the former question, Paolo. As to the point of data, we see like how it's important to have not only large amounts but quality data to take like better decisions with AI. Well, here at Núclea we have like 20 plus years of data on credit cards, bank slips, wire transfers, things that are really important to our clients in terms of understanding the payments industry and both of the endpoints of the transactions. And what we've been seeing here in practice is that many of our clients, they're taking advantage of all of that data and putting artificial intelligence on the top of that to getting competitive edge. very the applications, they can vary from like several fields, like from banks trying to understand who are customers that are more willing to buy their products, having a more targeted approach at clients, to acquirers, who are defining what are the best routes and ways that they can deploy their commercial team to make sure they're approaching the best clients. Risk management, we do see payments firms managing risk of default, of fraud, as you know very well, probably better than myself, in terms of who are the potential frauds and defaults or risks. So just to mention a few, so I do see a lot of firms, both in the payment sectors or banking sectors, in financial services in general, applying that, and basically on those three levels. How can I generate more revenues? How can I increase my business? How I can mitigate risks, and how can I decrease costs? Those are the three main applications, and I've been seeing them applying that on practice a lot. As Paolo said, they're still starting that journey, but I see like a lot of.
Can I give you a data point on this? Which
Absolutely.
And last year we released an interesting research called the Banking for Small and Medium Enterprises, Serve the World Economy with Data and AI. And actually we launched it here in Brazil, the SME Finance Forum that is organized by the IFC of the World Bank. And actually get the opportunity to thank Maximiliano Damian at Nubank and Franco Fassola at Santander Brazil, because they joined our research process, granting us a space for thinking together. That was also published in what we call the Voice of Makers. You can go and read the discussions in a small format interview that we put out there. And we made a global survey of 700 banking executives that have responsibilities with business banking, lending to the SMEs, SME payments, right? From also the card providers, payment rails, not only the financial institutions running credit. And then we also reached out to 1,300 almost entrepreneurs that own a small and medium enterprise. And we basically asked these entrepreneurs, what would they want from their financial institution to become smarter in running their business? And we asked the bankers what they think about, the entrepreneur's perspective. And what's interesting is that what the entrepreneurs said, and basically everywhere in the world, were these three things: more instant payment for all operating expenses. So they crave for clarity in their payment capabilities, because they cannot run, a sort of accountants to do the business and reconciling everything. So not only the money they get from the clients, but also the money they pay for somebody else, right? They want to have more, clarity on that. And then it's AI, basically, but they don't say AI. What they require is a capability to forecast, right, the next cycle in their payment, which means deploying AI to help them directing themselves in terms of their expectations for their cash flows. And the third thing that was also there was, and that's where bankers got the point of the, I think, payment, I have to say, in this case, but it got completely wrong when it came to the third element, that is the entrepreneurs look for embedded finance. So basically, the capability to access financial services within their non-banking journeys, which starts from payment all the time, right? Because the first thing they get embedded is payment, and then builds on that in terms of what else they can do to serve their purpose. What a number of bankers worldwide had thought that it was primarily open banking. Open banking, in this definition, was you have a cockpit that shows you all the money in the various accounts, because every shop has multiple relationships. But sort of the entrepreneur said, and so what? So what do you do with that, right? So that's where technology like AI can help you turn the data live into action elements, that the entrepreneur can be inspired by or review with in terms of their assumptions that help them to move their business forward, with more clarity. And that's where we see that there is a competition happening in that space. And because, again, those which are capable of accessing the data, having the data ready for the client to be consumed with clarity in terms of the classifications, right, and the generation, having clarity in where the data flows and how it flows inside and outside the account and reverse account, and having an understanding of how they can project basically potential necessities as working capital will give them a boost, because this takes time. And if you can do that in seconds, that's real value, okay? Because that's what it
That makes a lot of sense. I worked with SME clients for many, many years, and what I usually say, probably you heard me saying that, like a small business owner, he doesn't wake up in the morning and say, wow, today I need a bank account. Or, wow, today I need to, generate a QR code. They don't do that. They need to, run their business. So like the more you can relieve a small business owner from, doing transactions, going to a branch office, the more you can prevent him or her to do those things, those administrative things, the better. So he's like not wasting time doing like something that is not his or her core business, and doing something that is like related to their business. They also every entrepreneur wants to grow their business, so they need credit. They need working capital to produce more, to sell more, to buy cogs and sell. So that's something that they really need, and they do need a lot of advice on that. And it's sometimes very simple advice, like should I take what we call the working capital here, or should I use an overdraft? Overdraft is super expensive, credit line. You should only use like when you have unexpected cash flow. And but on the other hand, like working capital is like a type of credit. It's like it's longer. You can pay like in several installments. So, but you do have a lot of those millions and millions of small businesses with that question. They don't know where to go, and in that for that value proposition, AI can be very helpful. This is like a small advice. This is like a small what we call like advisory. But you can use technology to boost and to help businesses on that.
As we're on this topic, can we delve a bit more into embedded finance? So, because again, it's about the lessons learned. And I care about talking lessons learned because my next research in September, October will be about lessons learned of using technology in banking, and so how we can get inspired to do better going forward. Embedded finance is a growing trend.
Yeah.
And we did research already 2 years ago at the IBM IBV about that, seeing not only the banks that define it as part of the strategy, but those that are walking the walk while talking the talk, okay? However, maybe many are like, we didn't see the benefit of embedded finance as we expected. And the reason is because there has been a misunderstanding on what it means to generate value with embedded finance. It goes back to speaking like a central banker definitions matter, and this one really inspired by my friend Brad King. It is the opportunity to eliminate the friction that makes banking embedded, that means invisible, to generate new value. Now, hear me, I said new value. I don't say to scale transactional value. I said generate new value. So it's value that moves out of the transaction and gets into somewhere else. So in 2019, I was we opened the new IBM office in Shanghai, and we had the moment with clients. So I was doing the opening keynote, talking about fintech innovation. And a senior executive of, I can mention the bank because then we went public together with a paper about this topic of SPDB, Shanghai Pudong Development Bank, said, oh, that's very interesting. So we immediately had the meeting with the chairman of the bank. And the reason is because I was talking about the difference between value and volume.
Yeah.
So volume is transaction scaling, and value is something else that is not necessarily dependent on the size of the business. And basically what they said is that they already deployed a series of embedded finance, Chinese always had in this game, solutions and platforms that did not gain the traction they expected. And they said, I guess we made a mistake. We sort of competing in volume with Alipay or Alibaba. And we just can't, because they start from a space, as you said before, where people are not thinking banking, they think it's something else, right? So they can scale and grow. Instead, we have to think about how we use embedded finance to generate value for the client. So inside Banks of Fintech on Platform Economies, my fifth book and bestseller on Amazon Banking Books, there is the so-called Banking Reinvention Quadrant that tries to crystallize these aspects. And we position it inside this paper that was published by them called Panoramic Banking, or that is the translation I give to the Chinese term that I cannot pronounce. Could be holistic banking, if you like, very love the panoramic banking in English. And we actually...
Part of this podcast, if he tells us actually what's the actual term in Chinese?
In Chinese, we need to ask ChatGPT. And but then pronouncing it would be still a challenge. And that was co-presented by me and the chairman of the bank at the FinTech Inclusion Conference of Alipay in 2020. We did remote because it was the year of the pandemic. So the answer is we need to be very deliberate, again, in understanding the theory underneath the foundations for contextual banking and the transformation of the advisory model, because if you pretend to digitalize on the previous perspective and theory, we will not go to the end of the process. We need to shift them carefully by understanding what it means to generate value for the client. So now it goes. When you think about the SMEs, just saying, and you can read the Advisory Makers 2024, our discussion with Maximiliano that is published on this topic, just saying that saving time is the definition of value. Means that when you invest on your platform to create value for clients, you are out of the transactions. Your design thinking process is always geared toward where is the biggest value for the client. Because in the end, that we reward you with engagement, where then the client is there to talk to you for other opportunities. And that is what digital gives you as a chance to identify value and to scale that value, because otherwise it's difficult to scale it just with people, because, it's many conversations, many different elements. But that requires that conceptualization to be made right. And after, everything will be more consequential. But the gravity of the product and the transaction is strong. That doesn't mean transaction is not that. Transaction generates data, okay? Transaction generates opportunities. And in some cases, you grow in terms of the big volume for the commoditized aspects. But on top of that one, that is where you get the definition. So that is before. You get this data, you get this payment, but the value is not inside there. The value will be to position it somewhere else to create those services. You were also mentioning before, you need to get clear theory and principles to do that. Otherwise, you cannot make it happen.
Perfect. Very nice.
Well, it was a really nice conversation. It was a real class for us. Thank you very much, Paolo. It was an amazing. I learned a lot here today. So I would like to say thank you for me, for Núclea, and for all our audience. So we are ending this Núclea Talks today. If you have any message to our audience, please.
I have, if you like, the last message to your audience. I know that we are followed by many that work in financial services, work for a fintech, work for a technology company, and then broader audience interested to understand what goes on. And that is my secret sauce for everybody out there that wants to make it happen on mobile technology to transform financial services. The phone you have in your pocket, whether it is an iPhone or a Samsung or an Android, is a technology of the demand. Remember, people don't go on Amazon to see what happens. They want to buy one of my books, and then they can find it on Amazon, Banks of Fintech on Platform Economies. And then Amazon might go, Paolo Sironi, IBM, let's sell mainframe. Okay, so you might be exposed to the opportunity, and please consider it. But most of the revenues that will occur in financial services going forward, also in the better finance, will be the generation of this new value. Okay, and typically that is positioned as an offer mechanism. People need to talk to people to do that. So the question that you need to answer is how do I crack the code to put an offer-oriented economy on a demand-driven technology? So there are answers in this book. There are more elaborated perspectives inside my IBM Institute for Business Value Research. So if you read carefully and pay attention to what we are doing there, you will figure out your successful way to transform banks and fintech on the platform economies.
Perfect. Super nice.
Lucas.
Final remarks.
Yeah.
Final remarks. Well, it was just like also to thank Paolo. I learned a lot with you today. Hope we can have more chance to chat. Well, here at Núclea, we see a lot of the market. We have, access to transactions of our clients, so we can see how the market is behaving. And I do believe that we, especially over the last 10, 15 years, we have been seeing winners and, players that are not doing so well. And what separates them, definitely one of the main things that separate them is technology and the use of data. As I said, we have 20 plus years of large scale data here that can help clients to build it up. Exactly, to thrive in this market. So we'll be also more than happy to talk specifically about that at some point with you guys.
No, perfect.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, you both. Bom, pessoal, voltando aqui para o português, queria agradecer você que ficou aqui com a gente, acompanhou esse episódio. Para ficar sabendo mais dos próximos convidados, acompanhe a Núclea nas redes sociais e lembre-se, Núclea, o nosso negócio é potencializar o seu.